venture capital is just rocket fuel. So if you want to get to Mars, then maybe you don't need to buy my rocket fuel, but it's probably going to take you a long time to get there. And so if you can go faster with capital, then you consider taking venture capital. I think the general idea with venture capital is that venture capital, by definition, is I'm looking for opportunities that can create a lot of value in a very short period of time. Now, why is that possible? Well, it's usually possible because it wasn't possible before.
Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the 1% Podcast. I'm your host, Vin End.
And I'm Shane.
And today we're joined by my man, Brett Martin. Brett, welcome to the show.
Howdy, great to be here.
Brett, you are doing a lot of things. You are a man with many talents, many skills, many companies, and a massive background. I don't know where to start with you, but I know you sure do. So I'd love for you to tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and what you're up to.
Yeah, well, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I do a few things all related though. So I run Charge Ventures. Charge Ventures is a New York-based, Brooklyn-based pre-seed venture capital fund. We kind of write the first $500K $1 million checks to lead or co-lead pre-seed rounds for folks just getting off the ground. I like to say, they say you get your first round of capital from friends, family, fools, and ideally Charge Ventures. That's what we focus on. And then also I'm the co-founder of Fonzie AI. Fonzie is essentially a marketplace where the world's most cracked AI engineers meet the hottest AI companies building AI. So if you use AI to build AI, you should come to Fonzie and get a new job. And finally, I also moonlight as a adjunct professor at Columbia Business School, where I work with Daniel Guetta, who runs the Data Science Institute there, and we co-teach Analytics in Action, which is basically an applied data science machine learning class. So that's pretty much most of what I do.
Jesus, man. Okay. I don't even know where to dive in. Let's dive in with the first thing you said. Let's dive, because I feel like we do get a good bit of people that are founders and entrepreneurs, and people are always curious on how to raise money. Let's talk a little bit about what you do in Charge Ventures. How do you analyze a company? How do you determine if they're investable? Like, what do you look for?
Well, so I invest, I'm trying to be the first institutional capital in, right? So I'm investing usually alongside, or I lead around, and then angels kind of fill it out, or I take it down with another pre-seed investor. And so oftentimes we're investing pre-product even, and so we're really just investing in people. And what are we looking for? I mean, we're looking for someone that has a track record of excellence. It actually has less to do with whether they built a company before, but have they excelled in whatever pursuits they've gone after. So people that have chess Olympiads and math Olympiads and ballerinas or sports players or entrepreneurs that sold their last company for $1 billion. All have done something great. We're looking for that, and we're looking for someone who's often has some sort of insight. So they have a secret. They have identified an opportunity that maybe everyone else hasn't seen, or everyone else doesn't think is such a great idea. And then ideally the person has shown the ability to get stuff done even without money, because way more appealing is, hey, if you give me money, then we'll get rich. Is I'm going to get rich anyway, but if you put in a little money, you can have the chance of getting rich too, which is the same thing, but just positioned slightly differently. So that's pretty much what we're looking for is really impressive people on a mission.
What would you say is the main benefit? I've met a lot of people that are so freaking resistant to raising money. Like, I'm not giving my damn equity away. I'm gonna bootstrap this until we make the millions. Why do I need somebody else to give me some money to get there? Like, what would you see as the main benefit? Why would somebody want to raise capital?
I mean, venture capital is just rocket fuel, right? So if you want to get to Mars, then maybe you don't need to buy my rocket fuel, but it's probably going to take you a long time to get there. And so if you can go faster with capital, then you consider taking venture capital. I think the general idea with venture capital is that venture capital, by definition, is I'm looking for opportunities that can create a lot of value in a very short period of time. Now, why is that possible? Well, it's usually possible because it wasn't possible before. So this is what we call the why now. And it's usually made possible now by some major technology change. Hey, now we have Gen AI, or now we have mobile, or now we have the personal computer, right? And so all these new opportunities are unlocked. Or it could be a regulatory change or a cultural, a big cultural change. Those are also kind of reasons why now. And so the idea is that if there is no why now, then, and you could have done this anytime, well, that's probably not a great venture opportunity, because if it were a really great business idea, someone would have already done it. That's the general thinking behind when to take venture capital, is because there's a unique opportunity to make a lot of money right now. And if I don't raise money and capture this opportunity, then someone else is going to.
Interesting. Okay. So it's the opportunity to run faster than the other person who might have the idea in that moment.
Exactly. And, Peter Thiel, right, great venture capitalist, founder of Founders Fund, he's always talking about, like, you don't want to compete, you want to monopolize and own a market. And so a lot of these like venture capital businesses are businesses where you can own a market that will start small and become gigantic. And then because you can build a monopoly in it, you can, eventually, I'm not allowed to say that, but, you can eventually extract monopoly style rents, right? So that makes a good venture. That's a good investment.
I want to make the transition here, because you said that you're also heavily invested in research and also teaching into machine learning, and then also very curious about Fonzie AI as well. I'm going to ask you a very general just question about your thoughts. Is where AI is today, right? June 23rd, 2025, and it's been pretty much fully immersed, I would say, by the general public as far as like ChatGPT, probably for the last couple of months, right? Maybe a little bit longer, more give or take. Where do you see AI going in regards to, I would say, the workforce industry and robotics? Very curious on your take here. And then also if you can give a timeline to back that up, that'd be great.
So, okay. So, again, Fonzie AI essentially places engineers at AI companies, right? So we think a lot about labor and what's happening. And so what I'll do is I'm going to start very narrow on the software developer space, and then I'm going to move out to adjacent sort of functions in startups, and then I'm going to move more broadly to kind of the entire labor market. So what we're seeing right now in software, hiring for software developers, there's actually a bit of a split and confusion, right? So you may have heard about this, Jevons paradox for AI. With Jevons paradox is the idea that if the cost of something goes down, then actually people consume more of it, right? So you think, oh, the cost of something goes down, now we don't have to spend as much money on it. Well, actually, now it's cheaper, I'm actually going to buy way more of it, right? And so with software engineering, right, a lot of the early AI applications are tools that automate software. Claude Code, Cursor, you may have heard about it, right? Making hundreds of millions of dollars revenue in just a couple of years. That's Cursor. It's the main kind of copilot tool that software engineers use to write code. So what we're seeing, so one of the big questions we think about a lot is, are there going to be more or less software engineers in the future, right? On one hand, you have new machines that now can write code. And anyone can code, right? You've maybe heard about Hey Boss or Lovable.dev. These are kind of tools where you can literally just prompt the machine and it will write an app for you. So on one hand, you might say, wow, why do I need software engineers anymore? I can just have AI that writes code for me. On the other hand, you say, well, wow, now a software engineer can manage a team of agents, right? I can manage a bunch of software engineers, virtual software engineers, and I can write way more code. And so, now they're even more productive. Your software engineer before used to take you a year to build a feature. Now he can build a feature every month. So if I'm trying to win the game and build the best software and get the most customers, maybe I can get even more done with more software engineers. So there's this kind of split. And I think what's really happening is that the bottleneck for getting stuff done has changed. So whereas before the bottleneck used to be, oh, I think of all these ideas. I'm a crazy entrepreneur. I've got all these great ideas. And I now need to wait for my engineers to build them so they can build the next one. Well, actually now the bottleneck is knowing what you want to build. Vision, having the right idea and having a perspective. So, because software engineers it's no longer good enough just to build the thing, right? You need to build something that's useful that people want.
Right.
And we're actually seeing that in the rise of this thing called the product engineer. So this is a new term, product engineer, and it's essentially a software engineer that has an opinion about product. And so it's kind of a merging of the role product manager, designer, and engineer. And they're all kind of being collapsed into one because nowadays, with the help of AI, one person can do all of those things. So that's like the software engineering world which is to say that the bottleneck has moved and the skills that are required, the skills that are most in demand are changing. It's not just writing code anymore, but it's actually, understanding the customer and being able to translate what the customer wants into a piece of software using AI. And I think you're going to see the exact same thing start to happen across industries. So now let's take recruiting. Well, recruiting, there's a bunch of things you have to do. You have to identify what kind of talent you want, write the job spec, be strategic about where these people are and where they're spending time and what communities they're in and where they went to school and what type of skills they have. And then historically, you'd spend 70% of your time cold emailing, reaching out to candidates on LinkedIn, clicking on them, and phone screening for 30 minutes, basically weeding out the people that aren't good enough. And then you spend a little bit of time at the end actually trying to convince that the best candidates to come work at your company, right? Like a bell curve. I think the future is actually AI does a lot of that grunt work in the middle, the cold emailing, the phone screens with people you don't want. And then you end up spending most of your time on the strategy part and the selling part. And so what I see in the future is you're going to start to see every discipline change in the skills that they want, where AI is starting to do a lot of this kind of, what we used to call manual work. And then what the work they're going to do is actually going to start changing, and they're going to start doing other things and start working with the AI in a more efficient way. And so you start extrapolating that to the whole service, economy, right? And everyone's like, oh my God, AI, it's gonna, you've got these people in Anthropic and OpenAI, and these people are super smart, right? But they're also like drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, and they're like, oh my God, all knowledge work is gonna be done. And I talk to them and I say, well, what are you guys doing about this? Like, how are you, are you changing, are you buying land in Costa Rica? Are you like investing in the stock market in a certain way to position yourself for, by the way, the end of all white collar work? Yep. And they have no idea. And so what I think actually is going to happen is there's going to be job displacement. Certain roles are going to get completely eliminated. New skills are going to be needed, and people are going to get way more shit done. And there's going to be this liminal phase where companies don't actually know who to hire and what skills to hire, but they're going to start to realize, the bottleneck, we need more product engineers, we need more PMs, we need more really good salespeople as recruiters, we need more really technical recruiters that can talk with machines to do, automate the outbound.
So there's a lot of amazing things that you said, and I want to recap on some of it, and I also want to give you some crazy opinionated insights on my side as well, and just get your thoughts on it as well. I want to take the last thing that you said. Mark Zuckerberg just spent a fortune on grabbing a guy who believes within the next 5 years, because AI, it already is, it's outpacing the highest IQ people in the world. So he believes personally that we are going to have a transmitter device in our brain that has AI within the last 5 years to keep up. Now, there's obviously a lot of pros and cons to that, right? One, are we even humans anymore? Or are we just cyborgs? That's not what I want to get into, but I think that's very relevant, because if you're incorporating AI with human intelligence, you're now on curve, and now you're still incorporating the human element to it. And instead of having a computer as your competition, you're now utilizing that to the advantage now, but there's a lot of moral ethics that go along with it too. The next thing that I want to bring up is the recruitment. As somebody who has over 500 employees as a virtual assistant company, I deal with that on a day-to-day basis. So there's certain things that we're incorporating that are transitioning, because we have to, otherwise AI is going to take over. One is that entire process that you just said needs to be automated. Two, there's no more simple resumes. There's no more, I'm a software developer, I'm a content writer, I'm a prospector. With AI, you need to be multifaceted. So instead of looking and saying, this is what I can, this is my background and this is what I went to school for, it's these are the 25 AI tools that I am certified in and mastered. And this is everything, all the outcomes that I can do for your business. If you can now create a multifaceted, and in my case, a multifaceted individual that's overseas for cheap labor, you're now eliminating your competition, because you're now focusing, on what's coming up compared to, catching up. That's what I'm currently building. What I want, and very curious, because you're talking about the dreamers and the doers, right? Your product engineers, which I envision are your visionaries, who are actually coming up and looking at something and saying, okay, this is essentially what we need. Now you go build it. I'm still curious. I don't think that product engineer is ever going to be replaced. I think that's going to be the human element that's going to be there. Is this is the missing solution. Now build it. Now, are software engineers going to be replaced? Yes, as you just said, that even I or Vin or anybody else can go in and create an app or development. I'm just curious on, if you put that into a society with the blue collar and white collar, workforce, is 90% of the workforce outside of the 10% being entrepreneurs going to be replaced? If so, how long?
Well, I think there's been a trend toward, there's more entrepreneurship, more opportunities to create entrepreneurship. Anyone's got a YouTube channel or a podcast, right, is, now an entrepreneur. The bar for creating media went down substantially over the past 20 years, and we're seeing way more people creating media themselves. I think, you're going to see the same thing with software, right? There's going to be like crazy competition, for building software, turning ideas into software and getting it out and distributed to people. I don't think that's going to be different. And I think more people are going to learn those skills and do those skills. And to your point around, the resume, look, I still think the resume has value, because the resume is just a summation of your achievements, right? It's like, I did this, I accomplished this. And the truth is that, while past performance is not a perfect predictor of future, like, it's the best thing we got, and it's pretty good. If someone absolutely crushes, 5 things in their life over and over, like, I'm going to place a bet on them that they're going to crush the 6th, right? And so, that said, people do need to adapt. And what you talked about is this thing we call the work along, which is that, like, hey, we're trying to hire for AI competency. How are we testing that? Well, show us what you can do with AI. And so the problem is that just actually showing people the work product doesn't work anymore, because AI is really good at creating a work product. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, did a human create this, or did a machine? And so, what we need to do is say, let's see how you did it. Let's spend an hour kind of pair programming, pair marketing, pair customer servicing, right? Pair business model analyzing, and show me how you make sausage with the help of AI. And wow, that's really impressive. Oh, you know that tool? Oh, you got that? Oh, that was a really good question. Oh, you really were good at getting it to like create the exact thing you want. Like, that's how we're hiring these days.
The crazy
and then
thing
just on the last point, Like the neuro stuff, yeah, totally. But I lived with a neuroscientist for 10 years. He's my roommate, and he's now a professor of neuroscience. And the hardware stuff is not figured out there. So we got several years until they start putting implants in our brains.
Thank God, right? I mean, that's probably the best information I've heard all day. It's funny that even the common basics of like Common Core, my wife used to be a second grade school teacher, and it's not just the answer of coming up, it's how did you create the answer. It's crazy that just the basic principles of that is how did you come up with this is essentially it's proving it. Like, do you really know this stuff? I think that holds up to the end of time here. How did you
I heard the other day, someone was like these foundational models already have more information in their brains than any human ever in the history of time, times thousands, right? If they were as smart as a human, they would already have created like thousands and thousands and thousands of like scientific discoveries. But they're not there yet, right? They are like every new disruptive technology, they are often broken in a lot of ways that old technologies were, but they're really good at some new things in a way that is like completely new and disruptive. And AI somehow knows more about everything ever than in history of the world, and also like literally can't count how many R's there are on strawberry.
I once agree. I'm thankful that actually exists, because this just became mainstream, if we want to utilize that word, the past 6 months. All of these new AI tools that we're now hearing about have just been popular the last 6 months. ChatGPT, for people just starting using it, 18 months maybe, right? Prior to that, only the real, nerds knew essentially about AI. I hate using that word so generally, but that's really how it is. But now, like, what's going to happen in 6 months from now? The stuff that's already came out is incredible. The stuff that we're building internally, it's unreal. I am definitely going to be hiring your company here because I'm constantly looking for engineers to improve my model. So you already have a client here. And we haven't even talked yet. But
right.
I think it's I just think it's so fascinating where AI has been in such a short amount of time and the stuff that's already been done. And I love that there hasn't been all these discoveries yet, or that it's still utilizing the old technology, or that it's still slow when I ask it to do like a basic, agent scrape. If I wanted to utilize an AI agent, it still takes time for it to sync up with calendars, and it still requires, third-party tools to do it. It still takes a long time. I'm thankful for that.
And I think like using your business is illustrative. So you have a virtual admin business.
Assistant company, yes.
Yeah, right. So like, I think that the way people are thinking about this is so static. They're like, oh my gosh, AI is going to be able to, do everything that my virtual assistants are going to be able to do. It's going to be able to schedule, and it's going to be able to do this. And like, I actually think people are not thinking through it very much. It's like, no, your virtual assistants are going to get way more powerful, capable of doing way more things, right? So it's not going to stand still. The bar is going to go up.
Brett, you are my man, and there's a reason why to it. But for now, and then the question is how long does it last? So at the end of the day, as a CEO and as an entrepreneur, I utilize these AI tools, but most importantly, I don't have enough time of the day. I delegate, and I need to delegate to people who know how to utilize these AI tools to make my life and my business better. That's what's going to succeed, is people knowing how to utilize these AI tools. Learning it is one thing, but delegating to somebody who knows how to do it, as somebody who doesn't have enough time, that's the winner right there.
Amen.
I'm curious too, as you build businesses, or for anybody who's built businesses, we always encounter problems. What would you say are some of the current problems that most people might be facing, or that you've even faced and had to overcome in building, your organizations and seeing the way AI is changing things?
I mean, honestly, I'm not a very skilled person. So I usually get stuff done by knowing the right guy. I got a guy for everything. And, my co-founder, to his credit, he's an engineer. He very early, 9 months ago, a year ago, was like, dude, Brett, stop asking other people for help before you ask AI. Just try to do it with AI first.
That's funny.
And I think it was really great. And like building that reflex took a little while to stop asking our BDR for this or asking our ops person for this. But building that reflex and just doing it himself really, I thought, like brought back a lot of the joy of IC work. I was like, oh, this is fun. Actually, it's making doing work fun again in a way that I hadn't really experienced since, I was an analyst and I could really just spend all day building a model. Like the problem, it's not that I don't like building a model. It's just that I don't have time to do that anymore. I got 20 other things going on. But all of a sudden, if I can build a model by myself in an hour, wow, like why not put it on someone else's plate and do it myself and actually have a better understanding because I did it myself. Like that's amazing. I think it's like bringing, this opportunity for more senior people to actually start contributing again is just like a huge lift. So that's not a challenge. I think that's just like a huge opportunity nowadays building with AI.
I like that. So AI has become the go-to problem solver in your life. And I imagine it's probably starting to take over a lot of other things. I've noticed that people, myself included, can get really good advice from AI sometimes. Like ask it about something you're dealing with in life, ask it about a mental issue, and like AI's kind of got you. It's become really, really interesting. I wonder, do you foresee that perhaps the way the companies are going to start moving with this implementation of AI problem solving? Do you think they might just have somebody who would eventually become like an AI problem solver? Like everybody goes to this one person with all problems in the organization and they know how to speak to AI in a way that they just solve everything for everybody.
Dude, everyone's going to be an AI problem solver. My argument is that every single person in every function is going to need to become an AI problem solver. And if like what you could do before was like, they're talking about like T-shaped employees, right? It's like you have a general knowledge of everything and then you go really deep on one thing. It's just that your general knowledge just got a lot thicker, right? One person can know so much more about everything now, and they can get even deeper, they can go so much faster down the T, right? Like, whereas before it would take like, a week worth of work to like build the marketing messaging plan or something. It's like, boom, now I'm just like dropping that hammer in a couple hours and getting really deep. So yeah, that's what I think the future is, fatter T's.
Interesting. What are some of the best ways that people can prompt AI to get the most out of it? Like even in an experience like this, if you're saying, hey, let's problem solve. Because I know when interacting with AI, it's not necessarily about what you're talking to it about. It's how you're describing the situation and talking to it. What are some of the best ways people can learn how to properly prompt AI?
Like the big thing everyone's talking about these days in tech land is like context, which is basically starting with like what information are you providing to the machine to make its decision, right? Because if you're just like having it make decisions on its own without giving it any data, then you're going to get an average answer, because that is literally what these machines do. Is they basically average everything on the internet and then they give you back an average answer on the internet, right? And so if you want a really specific answer to your question, then you need to give it the context. You need to give it the data. And so, that might be just like dumping, copying and pasting something. It might be putting in a couple PDFs, right? But what I'm seeing more sophisticated companies doing is they're essentially getting like everyone has their little context packet. So if you're a CEO, you basically have your like updated business plan kind of written out at all times, and then you're dropping that in every time you ask a question. And so the machine already kind of understands your business model and everything about it, and then it can give you an answer that is tailored to your particular business. And if you're a marketer, you might have your own version of that is really focused on the marketing and the messaging and the branding and the competitors and all these other things, right? And so I think like just starting with like how you are architecting your internal systems to make sure that every employee is giving the most up-to-date business context to the machine when asking it for help solving problems, right? That's before you even get to the, the prompting part of it. And then the prompting part, right, is kind of this like, asking kind of really specific questions, defining what output you want, what a good answer looks like, giving it some examples of what a good answer looks like, giving it some guardrails around things not to do, and then providing that context, right? And so a lot of people have talked about that ad nauseum, but I think just nice specific formats around your prompt, and then giving it the right data.
Interesting.
So you have multiple businesses going on. You also teach on the side. I love that you're fully immersed into AI as well. What motivates you? I know it's a very simple question, but I'm just very curious.
I mean, I think the building part of like building something, putting it in people's hands, seeing them use it and be excited about it and getting value out of it. And even if they're like, this thing sucks, but why don't you fix it like this? At least they care enough to actually tell me that it sucks. Like, that is an amazing feeling. Like, I don't know, I have a kid on the way, which is awesome. And so I'm looking forward to that kind of creation feeling. And I'm sure that, a lot of people talk about it like that, but pre having a kid, this is the closest thing I've ever had to like, this is what creating and bringing something in the world feels like. Mm-hmm. In terms of, I think most goals are just kind of arbitrary. Like, I think we just set ourselves to something, and in my case, it's like building a successful company and creating value in the world. Like, I've, for whatever reason, chosen that. Could have been making music, but it happened to be building companies, and so I just get enjoyment out of that, of like running at that goal, and the striving toward it. It's arbitrary, but that's what I picked.
I think that's a very genuine answer. And then, I have 2 kids. Vin has a kid and another one on the way as well. Your answer will definitely slightly shift once your child, boy, girl, do you know?
I got a boy.
Boy, congratulations.
Thank you. Pretty excited over here.
I just found out I'm having another daughter, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, congrats.
Thanks. Yeah. Listen, kids are great, man. They really shape things. You know what? Actually, I got to ask you this question now that we're talking about kids. I know we had a guy on this podcast. His name is Corey Warfield, and very, very big into the AI world as well. And I remember I was having a private conversation with him, and I said, I think I want to do homeschooling with my daughter. And I was like, but I'm feeling a little hesitant because everybody's like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. He's like, you should 100% do homeschool. He's like, by the time your daughter's old enough to work, she won't have to work. He's like, just teach her entrepreneurship, sales, and to pursue whatever she's interested in. And I'm like, all right, good enough for me. What do you think, Brett?
Well, I just read this thing. Have you heard about this thing called Alpha School?
No. This
is a hot topic in tech parents crowd. It's this school. They, it was kind of funded by, I think, a really well-off guy in partnership with this woman that, the whole pitch is 2 hours of studying a day. Then your whole afternoon is kind of on life skills. And they're showing, kind of like 4 or 5x improvements in outcome. Like, kids are literally, and everyone's reading it as like, oh, AI. It's actually not AI in the sense of what we've been talking about for the past couple of years. It's not generative AI. It's literally just hyper, personalized learning. Kids can really broken down into small chunks, and they're given, clear goals, clear assignments, and also they're incentivized. So one of the core concepts that this guy does this anonymous breakdown of it is like, they literally are, incentivizing, i.e. bribing kids to learn. And, I think there's like a general distaste that like, oh, we should just love to learn for the, sake of learning. But his argument is like, he's like, well, you have to provide, you can bootstrap intrinsic motivation with external motivators. So you give kids a reward for reading books, they get in the habit of reading books, and then they start to enjoy reading books, and then they read books, on their own, which I thought was like, kind of made logical sense to me. I don't know. I seem to respond well to incentives. I don't know why children wouldn't. And so, maybe school is less like right now. It's kind of all stick, right? It says, oh, like, you didn't do well. Like all you can do is get 100% on your test, and everyone's like, great job. But like, there's no actual reward other than not being punished for doing poorly.
Well, the general side of the school system hasn't changed since schools have started, right? They teach you how to get a job, right? They don't teach you about life skills. They don't teach you about entrepreneurship. They don't teach you about, stock portfolios and IRAs and trusts and LLCs and, true forms of marketing. They just teach you to do good and work for somebody else, right? It's kind of the obedience aspect of it. I think homeschooling has its pros and cons. I think the only con that I would say is the social skills of it.
Yeah, and this is like basically like learning at your own speed, and then the rest of it is kind of socialization.
The life skills aspect. So, I wrote down Alpha School. I think that's a really cool concept.
Check it out. It's pretty wild.
I just looked it up too. It looks like they have one launching here in New York. I might have to take a look at this. It's pretty interesting. All right. Well, Brett, you may have converted a man who's really for homeschooling, but we'll see.
Converted.
I mean, let me know how it goes. You can, use your kids as the beta testers and keep it posted.
Brett, by the time Brett's ready to send his kid to school, he's like, "So what'd you think?" I'm like, "Don't do it." He's like, "Hey, right." I love it. Well, Brett, thus far, this has been a phenomenal show, man. You have such a wealth of knowledge in the AI space. We're coming close to the end, so I want to make sure that I get to ask you our final few questions here. So one of the biggest things that we love to ask is, what is your version of a 1% life? Our podcast is called the 1% Podcast, but not because of the fact that we believe you have to be a billionaire. It's more because of the fact, like you and so many on here, we believe that there is a 1% version of life that everyone could achieve if they're trying to excel greatly in a specific area. And so we're curious, what is your version of that 1% life?
Honestly, for me, just being able to work on whatever I want, whenever I want to work on it, is, autonomy is probably the most important thing to me. And, the fact that I get to work all day with people that I got to pick, that I get to choose who I want to work with on exactly whatever I wanted to make. And, the costs of that are lack of, stability. You got to make all these decisions all the time. Sometimes things don't work out. You got to deal with people that, don't work out, and you have to kind of take on all these things. But for me, it's absolutely worth it. And so, I just think like what a fortunate person I am to be able to do what I want when I want.
Amen.
Love it. So what would you say has been the best piece of advice you've ever received? You've done a lot in your life. I'm sure you got one heck of an interesting statement here for us. No pressure.
No, but I mean, look, maybe what I will say is someone with a lot of diverse interests, which can be a huge challenge sometimes when you're trying to move the ball forward. What I would say is that you can do a lot of things as long as those things mutually reinforce each other. And by pushing one thing forward, you kind of push everything forward. So, that's what I would say is like constantly be trying to, get everything you're doing rowing in the same direction so that, every stroke pushes everything else along at the same time. That's, if you can be monofocused and maniacal, like please do that. Steve Jobs says focus is saying no to 1,000 good ideas. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But if you can't help yourself, then at least make sure those things are working together.
Right. Like don't pursue 5 different business ventures, pursue 5 different avenues that might have a vertical within the same thing that you're already pursuing. So it's easier to move forward.
Yeah. Each vertical kind of reinforces and strengthens the rest.
Yep. Love that. Love that. And as founders and entrepreneurs, we can get caught up in shiny object syndrome and looking at the things and being like, wow, this is great. Let me go try this. And then boom, now you're not executing at anything. I think that's probably one of the most important pieces of advice that a lot of people who are business minded miss out on. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Final.
Still trying to abide by it myself.
Well, listen, man, it sounds like you're doing well. At least from what I gather, you're kind of everything is pouring into everything. So you're doing it. You're succeeding. So final question for you here, Brett. This is probably the most important one. How can people get in touch with you? How can they use Fonzie? If there's somebody who's looking to raise, how can they get in touch with Charge or you? Like, tell people how they could get into your ecosystem and what they could do to learn more or do more with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're hiring AI engineers or you're an AI engineer and you're looking to see what opportunities are out there, definitely hit me up. It's Brett BRETT at Fonzie.ai. Just mention the 1% podcast in the subject line so I can fish you out of that evil inbox of mine.
Love it.
Just
awesome,
quick side note. Why Fonzie?
Fonzie's cool. I don't know.
Hey,
is it from the show?
Hey,
definitely not.
Okay, I was just curious.
I'm not allowed. I mean, talk to my lawyers, but no. Fonzie just, it sounds cool. And we initially built a voice interviewer, actually AI interviewer, and so phone Fonzie. It was kind of phonetic. That's where we started.
Nice.
Love it. Well, Brett, this has been an absolutely awesome conversation. Thanks so much for sharing your insights. Stick around for a minute after the show. I got one more thing to talk to you about. But there you have it, folks. Please go check out what Brett's got going on at Fonzie AI. Reach out if you're looking for some pre-seed money and you want to, put gas into your gas tank and go really, really fast. And check out another episode of the 1% podcast. As always, like, share, follow, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you thought of the episode, and we'll see you on the next one. I'm your host, Vin End.
I'm Shane.
And that was Brett, everybody. See ya.
Bye, guys.